Okay, I'm starting that over. So good morning and thank you for joining us today, everyone. This is not trivia night, unfortunately, but this is a group advising session by the Pre-Medical and Pre-Dental Advising Office. This session is intended for anyone who is either new to a pre-medical or pre-dental track at UConn or who is a freshman and really making contact with our office for the very first time. Here's the brief agenda for this morning. So first, we're going to begin with a little bit of housekeeping, just introducing who we are, what our office actually does, what some of the resources are. And then we are going to dive into something we call holistic admissions. And so we're going to be covering in detail some different factors related to holistic admissions, including discussing academic metrics, experiential components, and core competencies. And we'll wrap it up by sharing a couple of resources. So please find our main contact information at the bottom of this slide. Our website is premed.uconn.edu, and it does cover a wealth of information. We have been updating it a lot recently as well. You can always contact us by emailing premed_predental@uconn.edu, and we do have an Instagram account that we update regularly as well. We are normally based on the 4th floor of the Rowe Building, which is a very centrally located building on campus, but this semester we all are working virtually from home. So as we dive into the housekeeping aspects now, we generally like to orient you to the fact that our office is one of the 6 subunits within the overall enrichment programs department. This is the department open to UConn students of all majors, all schools, all campuses, and provides opportunities for you to really enrich and enhance your undergraduate education. So you can see the full listing of programs below. Some of our sister units include the Honors Program, Individualized Major Program, National Scholarships Fellowships, the Undergraduate Research Office, as well as the University Scholar Program. So we all work very closely together under the umbrella term of enrichment programs. And just one way that you can really, or one example of someone who really has enriched their undergraduate education is this example of our recent graduate, Akshaya. So Akshaya somehow managed to hit almost every subunit within enrichment programs. She was a STEM scholar in honors. She had an individualized major that she designed called Health Policy and Social Medicine. She participated in the Health Research Program, which we will talk about in a little bit. She won some very prestigious international fellowships, and she's currently completing a graduate program in the UK and is a current cycle applicant to medical school as well. So this is just one example of how you can really make use of many of the resources at UConn. Moving on to who we actually are. So these are the main faces and names that you'll see associated with our office. At the top, we have Dr. Erin Ciaramboli, and she is the Director of Pre-Professional Advising. She joined us last May, and she is conducting pre-medical advising as well. On the left here, we have Dr. Keith Sanford, and let me let him introduce himself.
So just wanted to welcome everybody. Great that you're checking in with us. Feel free to connect with us at any time. So I bring a little history. I've been with the university about, 40 something years. Was at the medical school for many years as Dean of Students in services as well as admissions for the School of Medicine. Decided to come out to the Storrs campus as part of a sort of semi-retirement thing about 10 years ago. So I've been working with the program office there to bring some additional support for about the last 10 years. It's a great pleasure to work and to be available to counsel and teach with candidates. So welcome to you all.
Thank you. And as you can see, he is joined for the first time ever by a fluffy, furry companion. In the center there, we have Kalaya Arrington. She is a PhD student in educational psychology with a focus on social justice and creativity in education. She's working largely with our Rowe Scholars population, but also doing pre-medical advising. On the far right, we have Dr. Thomas Abbott, who is the pre-dental advisor for all UConn students, and he is also a professor of biology 1107. My name's Krista Rogers. I'm a program coordinator for the department and unit, and I also do pre-medical advising as well as coordinate our main workshop series in the spring. In the center bottom, we have Sue Ruggiero. She provides a lot of administrative support to our programs, especially our post-bac certificate program through the graduate school. And on the bottom right, we have Emma Beliveau, who's a recent UConn graduate and who has worked with us for application cycle related things for the past 2 summers. She has recently joined us to do some pre-medical advising as well. Just a couple other things. So first, we often get the question, what do I need to do to become pre-med or pre-dental at UConn? And the simple answer is there is no formal application or sign up. There's no official system designation either. So really the official, unofficial way of us knowing that you are on a pre-medical or pre-dental track is to join our emailing list. So if you have not done this already, if you take anything away from today's presentation, please make sure to email us at premed_predental@uconn.edu and just say, I would like to be added to the list. We do typically send out a weekly newsletter highlighting different events and opportunities, occasionally job type positions as well. And then all of our application cycle related information is shared via this list as well. In terms of what our office actually does, so we do spend the bulk of our time advising, and please note that you are welcome to seek us out for advising your very first week of college or after you graduate. So we do work with a significantly large population of alumni. And that's because it's actually becoming more and more common, and it's actually the norm for applicants to take a little extra time these days after they graduate before applying to health professional school. We will talk about that in a little bit as well. But just please note, you're always welcome to reach back out to us for both general advising and for application process related feedback once the time comes down the road. I did mention the post-bac program before. This is just something good to be aware of. At our university, it's a 1-year certificate program or 2 years, depending on what track you're in, and is intended for either students who have experienced a kind of career changer and decided that going into medicine or dental medicine is the correct career path for them and need to continue taking their prereq coursework, or it's intended for students who want to really strengthen their undergraduate GPAs before applying to professional school. In terms of different types of advising, so we do offer these group advising sessions, usually a few times per semester. But then you can also always request a one-on-one appointment with our office directly through our website. The spring semester, we also hold a series of workshops geared towards each upcoming application cycle. So that series kicks off with a really big one that's called Application Orientation. And in fact, we just held this one for the upcoming 2022 cycle last Wednesday. So you can check out that recording and the slides on our website if you're curious. That is usually followed by workshops geared towards more specific elements of the application process, including personal statements, secondary applications, how to select schools to apply to, and then later in the summer, some workshops about interviews at health professional schools. So you can see the flyer on the right. This lists our main workshops for the 2022 cycle throughout this spring semester. If you would like to request a one-on-one appointment with our office after this presentation, if you're pre-med, then you can actually do that directly through our website. Just go to the application appointments tab at the top. If you're pre-dent, then you can do that yourself at nexus.uconn.edu and just search for Dr. Abbott's name. And he typically holds advising hours on Wednesday afternoons. I mentioned this semester we all are operating virtually, or from home, I should say. We are not virtual entities. But when the office opens again, please feel free to swing by and grab a pen, a stress ball, or a highlighter. We do typically bring lots of swag to these kinds of events. Okay, we're going to transition now into the bulk of our presentation. And by way of just bridging some topics here, I'd like to draw your attention to these myths and facts about being a pre-professional student. So first of all, see on the left, pre-med and pre-law are majors. You're probably aware that UConn does not actually have a pre-med or pre-dent or pre-law major. Rather, the professional schools want you to major in whatever you're most intrinsically interested in, whatever you can talk about really excitedly, and what you're going to excel in ultimately. And so as long as you do demonstrate strengths in the core science prerequisites, you can pair that with any major of your choice. And so the second slide there, if you don't start in your first year, it's too late. Well, we already talked about the post-bac program and the fact that many applicants are just really taking their time these days to cultivate their different interests and competencies. And so you have no deadline, is what I'm trying to say, for applying to health professional school. Lastly, professional school admission is all about GPA and test scores. These are just a couple of the metrics that the admissions committees will be focusing on. But equally important are things such as gaining relevant clinical experience or volunteer or research as well. Okay. So let's focus next on this term called holistic admissions. And actually, Dr. Sanford, would you like to talk a little bit about what this means?
Sure. And this again addresses the point Krista was making about metrics. The purpose of holistic admissions is really to look at everything about you, everything that you've decided to incorporate into your plan to prepare yourself, for a professional career in healthcare. So in addition to, being able to demonstrate that you can handle the academic preparation and career preparation, they do like to see that you've taken time to get enough exposure and experience clinically to know what it's all about and to be embracing, such a professional direction. So this incorporates indeed some, opportunity to shadow folks in the profession, as well as to work directly with some patients in some capacity, to test your interests in real ways there. They like to see that you're a very service-oriented person. So, if you've had to, part of your goals and activities were to get engaged in a bunch of university or community or church-related service activities, those are things that they're very, interested in and, want to see evidence of, just the personal and professional characteristics of, altruism and commitment, excuse me, to other people. They also like to see that you, demonstrate some intellectual and curiosity and individual scholarship. It's often not a specific requirement to have certain research experience, but it does indicate a certain amount of, intellectual demand, as well as some, initiative and persistence and follow through and creativity to be involved in an independent scholarship activity of one sort or another, which we'll talk about a little later. But holistic, references really, they want to get a kind of gestalt of you as a person. What are your personal goals and interests? How have you decided to, orchestrate the time and effort that you have to achieve the goals that you've set for yourself? Holistic often means that they're trying to account for individual circumstances that individuals face, whether that be related to maybe just language issues. It may be related to, just constraints that you may have faced related to, finances, related to time you have for this, that, or the other thing. It's just this sense that not everybody is the same. We don't expect everybody, to have the same amount of everything. It's just really an attempt to sort of see you as you are, see where you started, and see what you've done to, present a candidacy that really touches on all the things that they're interested and concerned about, but is done in the context of your own sort of personal, in family life and done in the context of community issues or other things that you may have faced. So it's an attempt really to get a broader group of candidates that are representative of their particular clients and their particular goals that they have set for themselves. So it's a mixing of a lot of different considerations, and it just isn't, you have to have this GPA, you have to have this MCAT, be able, to get, to be able to get a spot in a school. They really want to attend to all those other things. So passing it back to Kristen.
Thank you. And so now we're going to dive into, we've broken them into these three big areas: academic metrics, experiential components, and core competencies. And we'll talk about what each of those mean in the context of things that you want to really attend to and develop as you move forward in your undergraduate studies and even beyond. First, this is just one other way of visualizing this. So when they view an applicant as the whole picture, right, they're focusing on everything from those academic metrics in the center you see, personal attributes, as well as experiences. So beginning with academics, another common question we get at the outset from many students is, what major should I be if I want to be pre-med or pre-dent? I know that there's no pre-med major, but what major should I be? And again, we really want you to pursue whatever plan of study is most exciting to you. You will have to demonstrate strength and ability in the hard sciences, again, to meet all the entrance requirements. However, your major can be anything you want it to be alongside those. So just for some reference though, last time we did a little data digging, we did find that the majority of students who were pre-med, pre-dent at UConn who were booking appointments with our office were in a major based in CLAS. So we do have some stats on the slide here, but we have also seen really growing populations of pre-med and pre-dent students in allied health sciences, for example, in the College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources, as well as a pocket of students in the School of Engineering and other schools as well. Traditionally speaking, the most popular majors still remain to be biological sciences, MCB, or PNB. These ones are nice because they do overlap with a lot of the prerequisite entrance requirements to medical or dental school, and do allow a good degree of flexibility in your plan of study. However, that second bullet point there lists just a few of the other majors that pre-med and pre-dent students are currently pursuing at UConn. I always like to share two anecdotes. The first one being that in 2018, our eventual matriculant to the Stanford School of Medicine, she was actually an English major, which I thought was fantastic. And she really cultivated these strong writing skills, both technical writing and creative writing throughout her time as an undergrad. Last year, the president of the Pre-Dental Society at UConn was also a history major. And so, just goes to show that schools are also looking for students who are going to bring very unique and different backgrounds to the table, and contribute a different perspective as well. Just to point out in the middle there, you can see individualized major. So if you're not aware of this, this is one of our programs and enrichment programs. And it gives you the opportunity to essentially design your own major. So you actually handcraft your own plan of study, and it does have to be cohesive, of course, but if you have a lot of interdisciplinary interests, this could be a really cool way to create a plan of study that accounts for all of those and not just be stuck in one specific academic department. The program has seen a great explosion of health-related IMJRs, as they're called for short, as well. Especially in the areas of health disparities or global health, especially majors focusing on social determinants of health that might blend the hard sciences with things like sociology or psychology as well. All right, so now let's dive into a little bit of the nitty-gritty here. I am going to pull this up on our website, so it's a little bit bigger. And in the meantime, Dr. Sanford, would you like to talk about those three big words at the top and what they mean to admissions committees, please?
Okay, so, I think the place most people start is, what is the basic coursework required and how is it best to go about, you know, uh, being successful and being able to prove your readiness to go on to additional graduate and professional studies. So, historically, the health professions have required, essentially a good, strong math and quantitative background, a basic year of biology and chemistry, additional work in organic chemistry and physics, and some upper division biology, as well as some humanities and social sciences. So what you see listed there are all the sort of basic UConn offerings that will bring you in that direction. With respect to the three areas highlighted there, when a committee, opens your file and starts to look at everything in your application and your letters and your secondary application and all those things, they do focus on your academic record in part, and what they're looking for is at least a sampling of interest in different disciplines that you've shown through what you've engaged in. So think of it in terms of, what is my goal for my undergraduate education in terms of getting some exposure to different disciplines, whether that's in social sciences, whether that's in humanities or the sciences. So they like to see some breadth there, and not. There are a number of majors that are really jam-packed with requirements, and there's often not much in terms of additional selections that you can add. So you just have to be thoughtful and careful if you're in a major that's really, makes it very constrained to be able to add some things. And maybe there's other ways to add some breadth in terms of other subject interests that you have. Most schools have some kind of distribution that's expected for a degree. And, really this is sort of the old liberal arts curriculum, focus that most universities have that they require for a bachelor's degree. And so as long as you stick with that plan, and for the most part, you'll be able to, meet that expectation. But committees indeed like to see that you have some broad interests that have been expressed through what you've chosen to do. Depth is another area. So rather than do a lot of intro classes for all those different areas, they do like to see that you've been excited by one or another area that's you're interested in, certainly your major. There's a lot of students that identify minors. There's a lot of students who identify a couple of majors. You don't necessarily gain any extra points by adding up or adding on or accumulating majors or minors. But, schools do like to see that you identified an interest, moved on to take a 2,000, 3,000 level class in that particular area, just as a sort of natural evolution of your exposure and interest in a particular area. A third is rigor. So you will see different options available in some of the basic courses that you take, as well as different ways to show some additional strength in certain areas. So for example, you could take physics, algebra physics, you could take calculus physics. So certainly differences in terms of course preparation and rigor, and the amount of time you're actually going to need to commit to, excelling in some of these classes. Even a course like biochemistry, in a university, there's a 4-credit with lab. There's also a 5-credit with lab. So there are some different choices to select from as you put together your plan. And even within your own specific major, you come to recognize there are certain classes in those majors that are recognized as the sort of more rigorous of the course selections in there. So some of it is just selecting those that are going to be challenging to you, that do require a bit more sort of commitment of time, effort and energy to excel in. So breadth, depth, and rigor are three things as they look at your candidacy, and the choices you've made about what to include in your academic preparation is the way that they approach that. A fourth is independent or individual scholarship, which sort of falls into a bit of a little different category, which we'll get to later. Back to you.
Thank you. I was going to say, would you actually like to walk through a typical sequencing of these prereqs, which it does vary a bit. And then I do promise we'll take questions after that. So please be entering your questions in the chat in the meantime.
Sure. So, tried and true, the, typical standardized curriculum would be a student in the freshman year, doing some college calculus, doing basic biology and chemistry. Organic typically is maybe a second year class. Physics is generally a third year class, along with some upper division bio, like biochemistry. Along the way, you're sprinkling in, some psych, you're sprinkling in some sociology, maybe statistics. You also need a year of English. So that's the kind of typical format, and science majors have this kind of built into their sequence anyway. If you're in another major outside of the sciences, you need to sort of get started with some basic biology. In chemistry, it's good to have some strength shown in some math work. But again, you want to sort of go at it at a pace you're going to be able to excel at, and you're going to be able to, show strength in all those foundation classes. If it takes a little more time, given your overall goals, that may include some other disciplines, some other subjects. You just have to titrate it to what you can, manage well and do well in. And, one of the basic lines I always try to give is, when you're ready, you're ready. Don't try to press it too much. Every year we see students just feeling that they can do everything at once and just get by it and move on to the next step. And that's, often where people, stub their toe a bit and just get in over their heads. And then it's just harder to climb out of, grade performance hole if you're got sort of too much on your plate. So it's good to be thinking ahead, plan it out as a calendar, what you're planning this, that, or another semester. Do it in a very, orderly, sequential manner, and just try to avoid putting yourself in, so much stress that you're trying to do everything at once. That's invariably where we see some students sort of, just experience some difficulty and don't do as well. But that's the basic sequence for most folks. Again, if you don't get to all those as part of your undergraduate goals, there are opportunities and pathways through additional work you can do as a returning student or as a post-baccalaureate. Some folks go on to different pathway programs that are available. So back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanford. So just in case you're a first-year student or still getting used to the way that UConn numbers their courses, let me just highlight a couple things here. So as you can see for Gen Chem, there's actually two different sequences you can choose from, and they both cover the same content. It's just one is spread over 3 semesters, one is spread over 2. So I would say the majority of students, though, do take the 1127 sequence. Now, organic chemistry is a little bit different than Gen Chem because the labs are not built in. And so Orgo 1, 2443, and Orgo 2, 2444 are actually both 3-credit lecture-based classes. The Orgo Lab is a separate 3-credit course, 2445. And so this is technically a co-req of Orgo 2. You can take them at the same time, or you can take the lab after. We really see students, it's like 50% take them together, 50% take them separate. It just depends what your major is and what else you have going on. I would mention as well, if you're an engineering major, then there is a 1-credit Orgo lab called 2446. And that one is perfectly fine for you to take because you already have a very rigorous schedule that the School of Engineering has set for you. In terms of physics, so there are several different sequences you can choose from as well. If you're taking a full year of calculus for your gen eds anyway, and you happen to like calc, then we would recommend the 1401 sequence, which is physics with calc. This also just has that added level of rigor, which we talked about a little. If calculus is not your cup of tea, or just for whatever reason, the 1201 sequence, physics with algebra, is also perfectly fine. And then 1501 is for engineers. When it comes to English, we always get a lot of questions, especially from people who have brought credit in from either AP or ECE. And so generally speaking, regardless of how much credit you're bringing in, we would count that as one semester. And a lot of the schools do want to see that you've taken at least one semester on a college campus. So either 2 semesters at UConn or 1 semester at UConn if you're bringing credit in. If you do want to play it as safe as possible, make sure you're taking courses from the actual English department, meaning it has that ENGL catalog code in the title of the course. In addition, so biochemistry is typically one of the last prereq students take, because the co-req, it's technically a co-req of Orgo 2 as well. However, in this case, most students do take biochemistry after they complete Orgo, so it's either a 5th or 6th semester course. Dr. Sanford did mention a separate 5-credit biochem course, that is MCB 3010. And that one, the lab portion dives even more into the research elements. And so that could be good preparation if you're thinking of a combined program, for example, an MD PhD track, or a career as a physician scientist, just to really cultivate that thread. All right, I think I'm going to pause at this moment now, and let's take a look at the chat. In fact, I don't see any questions yet. So whatever questions you have related to coursework or academics or sequencing, please drop them in there so we can address them before moving on. This might be a first. No questions. Usually we get a question about math as well. So for medical schools, a lot of them really have de-emphasized the amount of math they're looking for. If they do specify anything, by the way, it's usually either 2 semesters of calculus or 1 semester of calculus plus 1 semester of statistics. There are some dental schools that require a full year of calculus though, so just be aware. Okay, going once, going twice. This might be a new record. Okay. If you think of something, please don't hesitate, just drop it in the chat. Okay. So moving along, we did want to just address more topics related to bringing that credit in. This is something we typically like to chat with you on a one-on-one basis, just because everyone's has such a unique situation and is bringing different things in. Beginning with ECE credit though, if you did bring a lot of ECE credit in, just be aware that we would generally recommend bringing that in if you got a B+ or A- or higher. Because that is factored directly into your undergraduate GPA. If you're bringing a lot of AP credit in, very general rules of thumb is that the schools are pretty flexible when it comes to AP Bio, even if you took the full year worth of credit. If you do want a bit of a refresher though, we would probably recommend to accept the 4 credits for Bio 1108 and then retake 1107 at UConn, because that does serve as a really important prereq for moving on to some of these upper level classes like genetics or cell bio. And as well as for MCAT purposes, it's a good content refresher. Schools can get a little finicky when it comes to AP chemistry or physics if you are planning to bring the entire year worth of credit in. So if that's the case, definitely something we'd like to dialogue with you about one-on-one. Please set up an appointment. But we would generally recommend one of two things. So either you retake one of the intro-level classes during your time at UConn, or if you feel you really do have a solid grasp on the content and that wouldn't be in the best interest of your time, instead plan to take one semester of content in that discipline that's upper level. So probably 3000 level or above. With chemistry, that's probably something like physical chemistry or analytical chemistry. And that way, that just alleviates any concern in the school's mind that you haven't had enough of that content on a college campus specifically. Okay, just a few special offerings to be aware of. In addition to advising and coaching applicants through the application process, Dr. Sanford does typically teach a few classes per semester. The one that's offered every semester is called Patient and the Healer. So as you can see, this is a 3000 level course in PNB. It's also a rare 2-credit course at UConn. And it typically meets for 2 hours once per week in the evening. It's a really cool class because you do learn how to take a patient's medical history and conduct an interview, an examination with them. In fact, the final of the course is that exact thing. And so because of its popularity, though, it does fill up every single semester. We have a request form directly on our website under the same tab as the appointment requests. So if you are interested in taking that, the form will open about a week before course registration begins, and you would want to get that request in early. Sometimes it's just not possible to get into it until you're an upperclassman as well, due to the number of requests we receive. Okay, just some other examples are Intro to Physical Examination, Health of Communities. Those are both typically taught in the spring semester. Then also good to know is that there is an EMT course offered at the Storrs campus. So the catalog code for that is AH4092 EMT training, and it's a partnership Allied Health Sciences has with Hartford Hospital. So you can receive 4 credits for your time if that's something you were planning on doing anyway. The one catch to this is perhaps the fact that it is a really big time commitment during the semester. So it is typically about 4 hours on Monday and Wednesday evenings, along with 8 hours on Saturdays. So you just have to weigh the pros and cons based on your schedule. So some students that's feasible, but other students might pursue this kind of thing over the summer. Okay, lastly, our office does offer an MCAT review course every spring semester as well. It is currently operating right now in a completely virtual format for this year. But that's a really great way to focus on test-taking strategies and learn how content is actually utilized on the MCAT when you're really getting serious about being in the thick of studying. Okay. Next, we're going to shift our focus a little bit now from academics to the more experiential aspects of your preparation as a pre-health professional student. So we're going to break this into kind of 3 big areas, and we'll begin with the clinical experiences and/or medically related experience. So as you can see, we like to further break this into 2 main chunks. We call it shadowing and then direct patient care experience. And you can think of them like 2 sides of the same coin. So it's ideal to cultivate a degree in each of these areas. Although I will say at the moment, shadowing is one of the hardest things to obtain in the current pandemic environment. So don't be too discouraged if you can't get that at this moment. So shadowing is important for a couple of reasons. It allows you to see what the doctor, physician, dentist does and really make sure that this is the correct career path for you. So that schools are also convinced that you're committed to this path. In addition, you can gain valuable insights into watching patient-doctor interactions, as well as being able to really articulate the role of the physician or dentist in the healthcare team. So based on who we see our most successful applicants are, we do typically recommend about 50 to 75 hours of shadowing. Ideally, that would also be split between a few different specialties of medicine, just to give you some more diverse perspectives. Now, the flip side of this coin is direct patient care experience. So whereas shadowing is more passive, direct patient care experience is when you're taking more of an active role. You either have one-on-one interaction with patients and/or you're the one administering the healthcare. So I'm going to pause just to let that sink in for a sec. Again, it means you either have one-on-one interaction with patients and or you're the one administering the healthcare in some form. Okay, and so there's a lot of different avenues where you can attain this kind of experience. It could be through a very formalized training program. For example, if you do elect to pursue a license such as EMT or Certified Nursing Assistant, CNA, you could receive training in becoming a medical scribe, for example, and that's become a very popular growth year type activity, especially. Medical assistant, phlebotomist, all those are other ideas. We have some others listed on the screen here as well. Now, in addition, it could be obtained through some kind of volunteer or service type role. So maybe you do volunteer on a regular basis at your local hospital or a local elder care facility, for example, and you do really have that one-on-one interaction with patients. Okay, so there's no one right or wrong way to obtain this, but it is really critical to get some hands-on experience along your way as well. Just a quick note about a program that we've worked very closely with over the past year. If you haven't heard of it, there is a program called Yukon Health Leaders, and they're based at the Health Center in Farmington, Connecticut, where the Yukon Schools of Medicine and Dental Medicine are located. So this is a really cool program. It was started by a second-year med student there. And they focus really on the social determinants of health, and they do a lot of screening of patients and making sure that they're connected to all the appropriate resources in the Connecticut healthcare system. So it's a blend of service, also clinical type experience, and then also puts you in direct contact with some of the physicians there for further professional development. Participants also complete a series of modules geared towards working with specific populations of people, as well as learning about those social determinants of health, which are largely adapted directly from Yukon Med's curriculum. Finally, it gives you a lot of chances to also take on a leadership type role within the program, which a lot of our current students are spearheading right now. Dr. Sanford, before we move on, what would you like to say about clinical or medically related experience in general?
Yeah, I think the admissions committees just want to be sure that you've thought carefully and placed yourself in a position where you've at least been able to observe the arena in which you would be operating as a professional, what your responsibilities and obligations and duties are in such a role, and that you embrace all of it. The one thing that happens, a lot of folks have a very idealized view of what being a health provider is going to be like, that you're going to be in, everything is going to be rosy, you're going to save lives every day. And like most things in life, there's things that are repetitive that get to you after a while. There are things that you may not necessarily enjoy. Keep in mind, you're often dealing with folks when they're not feeling that great. They're maybe not being their best selves when you interact with them. So they want to have a sense that you've experienced the role in at least some vicarious ways, and it still rings true as something that you'd like to dedicate your lives to. And just to have a sense of the variety of things that go into sort of definition and experience of health for individuals. So to have an appreciation for not only the biological causes, but also social causes and structural causes of illness is an important thing to be able to build into your preparation scheme. So they want to have some kind of lived experience that you have been able to gather to either convince you or not that this is a way that you'd like to dedicate your life.
Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna check the chat now. Before we move on to research, what questions do you have about any of the clinical type of experience we've just touched on?
I would just add that every school sort of has its own little matrix. When somebody puts in their file, they have their own little scheme for going through it and sort of jotting down or measuring or tallying up the amount of hours that sort of meet certain things that they're particularly interested in. So every school has its little, separate matrix that they ask their committee members as they go through files to work with. But it all sort of focuses on these general areas that we've talked about related to, at least getting some experience clinically, having some interaction with people in the field, with a service orientation in various ways that can play out based upon your special interests. And let me just highlight, something that we just characterize, I suppose, as unique areas. Schools are interested in interesting people, so they want to see what you get excited about. They want to see what you've committed your time and effort and energy to, whether that's sports, whether it's music, whether it's church, whether it's international affairs, whatever it might be, student government, et cetera. Pursue your interests, your passions, and be able to demonstrate to them that you're not just a one-dimensional academically prepared student. You really have moved ahead and set other goals and accomplishments for yourself. Back to you.
Thank you. We just saw a very cute nose come into the camera frame too. So excellent. We have 2 questions now. Also, by the way, one of our catchphrases in the office is med schools, dental schools are looking for exciting people. That's one of the main mantras you'll hear us say. So just always keep that in mind. I'll address the first question. So would it be expected for students to find these opportunities all on their own, or does UConn point students in the direction of clinical opportunities? So when it comes to shadowing, usually you are expected to seek out and find those opportunities on your own. It's definitely easiest to utilize any family friend connections in healthcare you might have, and or consider beginning with your own pediatrician, primary caregiver, dentist, etc. Because you do have an established connection with them. And usually once you have a foot in the door somewhere, that can lead to more networking and opportunities elsewhere. In terms of direct patient care experience, so there are a variety of avenues you can go about directly through UConn to obtain that. I just mentioned the Health Leaders Program as one idea. Community outreach is the branch in charge of all service type programs at UConn, and they have a lot of semester-long programs, including a whole chunk in healthcare. So I'll touch on them in a little bit and point out a couple of those examples where you can get that experience as well. Some of the student orgs too, they provide some opportunities. For example, UConn Rescue is the org for students who are either current or aspiring EMTs. And so they have a lot of service type opportunities, as well as offer, they're called Stop the Bleed classes on campus, which would qualify too. Okay, our second question is, do you think that medical schools would prefer certain clinical experiences as opposed to others? For example, a PT aide versus a medical scribe. Dr. Sanford, would you like to take that one?
I don't think there's any sort of magic one that one school or another sort of recommends. I think you want to sort of get your foot in the door someplace and evaluate a few varied experiences. So, I mean, if you have a real sort of foot in the door to getting, if it's PT, for example, go ahead and do it as a way to get started. And, I think eventually you want to work into a circumstance where, you're trying to get some experience with a variety of different patients. And part of this is sort of where you feel your interests lie. One of the common questions we get is, gee, should I become a CNA or should I become an EMT? So EMT is going to give you a lot of acute and trauma exposure. So you're going to, be sort of trained to help and address patients in need in terms of car accidents, heart attacks, a variety of very acute onset emergency setting situations. And a lot of students just love to be at that sort of cutting edge action. And that's what excites them. Something like CNA, you're going to be really dealing with patients in a little bit different setting usually. Ordinarily, this is going to be more multiple systems, internal medicine, chronic illness focused. So, it's going to give you exposure to quite a different slant of patients and patient concerns that you would get, say, through an EMT. And PT, of course, is going to give you a lot more musculoskeletal system issues. So if that's your kind of keen interest, that is going to give you some exposure there that you might not get in the same way, through, scribing or other things. So there's no magic to it. I would say, start with where you have an in and make sure that's going to lead you, and it's going to evolve based upon, what your interests and experiences are.
Thank you so much. So I think a good way to summarize that maybe is really do some reflection on what types of exposure you want to get and which types of skills and, personal competencies you really want to develop and what kind of environment you would best gain those through. We do have another question. So when should we start thinking about shadowing experience? It's never too early to start thinking about shadowing because it is a really logical kind of first place, right, to be in the clinical setting and kind of watching, observing, taking notes. As I mentioned, shadowing, however, is probably the most difficult thing to obtain in the current environment. So don't get too discouraged if you can't, get a foot in the door somewhere right now. It's fine to reach out to people, ask them. There might be a few places that will allow it with some preventive measures, but if not, at least get on their radar for the future. You might also see, we've even had in our newsletter a couple times some of these virtual shadowing type programs, which can be a good kind of intermediary substitute in the meantime. And just to highlight something that a lot of the med schools have been saying as well, they're aware that shadowing is very difficult to obtain. That's not going to reflect negatively on anyone individually right now. But what is most important is that you're able to stay engaged outside of the classroom somehow. And almost anything you're doing, whether it is medically related or not, you can tie back to articulating what skills you developed along the way and then how those will translate to the field of medicine. Okay, so I am in the chat box right here. I'm going to drop a really big document with some ideas to do during the pandemic. Please just save that in your browser and digest it at some later point. Because these are just some things that maybe it'll spark an idea, especially in terms of service. Even if you can't find a lot of clinical experience right now, you can absolutely be working on that service orientation, whether you're in-person or a virtual setting. Just one example, this past summer, we had a lot of students become trained crisis line counselors. And so that's something that typically took them about 30 hours of training, but they're still communicating with people, they're still developing their communication skills, and it's something you can do from your house. So you'll find information about that as well as some other ideas in this document here. Okay, I think I'm going to keep moving at this point now, but please drop any more questions you have in the box. So next, let's shift focus to talking a little bit about research/independent scholarship, which is not always a formal requirement for health professional school, but if you are applying to a lot of research-centric schools, it can be very important. And so Dr. Sanford, I'm going to throw you the question, what type of research should I be doing? When should I start? And then after that, I will point out a couple resources at UConn.
Okay, thank you. So again, as schools look at your academic program activities and your selected group of activities that you pursued on your own, there often helps you to be able to demonstrate some interest in group or individual scholarship. So a bunch of ways to get involved for those of you who may be in thesis programs where it's a requirement. You're going to do essentially what's the equivalent of 3 or more contiguous semesters of dedicated independent study or research to a specific capstone project that you will identify as you move through. So, that is a very significant commitment and effort on the part of a student. Many opportunities there at the Soares campus, as well as connections with, the medical school and Jackson Labs and others, Hartford Hospital, that, might be the location where you might do some work. Um, and often you can do that for academic credit, as, just independent study credits within your main department, or the department for which the person you're working in, principal investigator, is in. Students often, if they're not in a thesis-oriented program, they choose to get involved in independent studies with faculty members. Thing to do there is, be looking into maybe areas of interest you have, prompted perhaps by, what you've taken in classes or what you've heard about from folks in classes you're taking. Go to their website addresses, look at what they've been involved with, get a sense of what's going on in their labs. It's a good idea to try to identify and then talk to some of the students who are actually in the lab. Very often that's a great way to actually get connected with the faculty members themselves, because they get so many emails of interest. Often you send out all these emails and you don't get a response. Sometimes if you make a little added effort through students who are presently working in the lab, first to find out what they're doing, get a sense from them about what is exciting to them about being involved in that particular project or lab, and then can lead to introduction to the principal investigators in the lab, or the advanced postdoc students or graduate students that you typically work with, as you learn the ropes in any particular area. So, there are different ways to get involved in academic work for credit, for sure, at the school. What a lot of other students do is they'll apply to these summer fellowship programs at different places. These are usually 8 to 10 weeks, where, if selected, you apply and get selected for that. You get matched up with somebody, you go and meet with them, you read some background material. They train you in some of the basic methods and materials of the lab, and talk through a specific project they'd like you to work on over the time that you're there. And you often end up needing to give a talk or a presentation based upon your work. So these fellowship, internship kinds of experiences are very popular, offered at a lot of places. It gives you just some other sort of extended enrichment outside of the university, that can be very positive as well. Together with something you might already be doing at the university, or you may want to choose to do that instead. So there's a lot of different approaches and things to do, to get your feet wet. Krista will talk about the Office of Undergraduate Research and all the materials they have and all the programs they have, which is a key resource of the university. So, that's the best way to sort of get yourself started there, but recognize there's just a number of ways you can get involved. In terms of, what may happen is you may well get very excited about the area of interest that you get connected with, and it might lead you to a decision that you really want to commit some additional time after your completion of the degree to really become more of an expert in that area. A lot of research programs really demand a commitment of 2 years now, right out of college, and they don't do as much as they used to. They don't do sort of 1 year sort of programs for students. So we often see a student, go on after college to work anywhere from 1 to maybe 4 years or so in a research setting of that they have a really keen interest in, and then eventually evolve back to be candidates for the professional schools. So in terms of research areas, you want to study what you're keenly interested in. It doesn't have to be a bench project in chemistry, or physics or biology. If you're interested in an area, we've had folks in the humanities, we've had folks in the social sciences choose to do projects in research activities in those areas. So that certainly qualifies as independent scholarship. So the schools want to see what you're interested in and the time and effort that you've committed to it. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. And yes, you don't need to be doing research in your major department either. We often get that question. So really reflect on what topics interest you, and then seek out faculty members who are doing things that are surround those topics. So let's look at a couple of resources here, beginning with the Office of Undergraduate Research, one of our sister units in enrichment programs, if you recall. And okay. This is their website right here. First thing to note is that every semester they offer some very conveniently titled workshops that are called Getting Started in Undergraduate Research. So that would be a really great landing point if this is something you're thinking about getting involved in the near future. They do have some of their handouts right here at the bottom of the page, as well as a really comprehensive Getting Started guide under the Students tab as well. Usually it boils down to the equation of you want to explore what some of your interests are, then you want to do some of your own research identifying faculty members you might want to reach out to, and then try to strike up a dialogue or conversation to talk about those areas instead of just randomly cold emailing saying, hi, do you have any research opportunities available? That doesn't usually work, maybe occasionally, but it's usually better to strike up a dialogue first. And so just one really great thing to know as well, this website even includes sample email templates that you can refer to when you're ready to try connecting with faculty. In addition, OUR, as we call them for short, they offer a variety of funding opportunities for students. So there's a very long list here, as you can see. Just to highlight a couple of the ones that pre-meds and pre-dents especially make use of. So I draw your attention to the SURF grants, which would pay you up to $4,000 to conduct research at any of the UConn campuses over the summer if you're currently involved in a project. Okay, in addition, IDEA grants, always good to be aware of. This is a really cool program. You can also get up to $4,000 either for an individual or a group-based project, and it's completely student-driven. So if you have this idea for a really cool endeavor, research project, community initiative, you can propose that and receive the funding to carry that out. So definitely check out some of these student profiles on the website here. Sahil, for example, he actually was a student worker in our office, and he's currently taking a couple of growth years before applying to medical school. Lastly, the Health Research Program. So this is still a fairly new program. It's in its 3rd or 4th year at this point, and it's a partnership we have with UConn Health, again in Farmington, Connecticut. So it's really cool because you as an undergrad are actually placed in a faculty's labs at the professional schools and health center. And so you do have to apply to each of the labs individually, but you can get a sense of the kinds of offerings right here on the website. It is a full-time commitment over the summer, and then they do hope that you're able to continue that position in a reduced capacity, of course, during the academic year as well. So unfortunately, the deadline for this program for each upcoming summer is usually the very first week of February. So it has just passed, unfortunately, for this coming summer, but something to be aware of moving forward. Okay. All right, next, let's talk a little bit about extracurriculars. So it is important to just cultivate whatever your passions are as a person, as a student along the way as well. And so one way you might do this initially is to get involved at one of the 600 plus student orgs at UConn. Let's highlight a couple of the bigger ones. Okay, actually, I'll skip that for a sec. So if you are interested in becoming involved in a health-related org, this lists some of the really bigger ones. However, we have identified 40 plus organizations that have something of a healthcare focus to them. And so the big springboards are definitely the Pre-Med Society, the Pre-Dent Society, the Pre-Physician Assistant Patient Care Alliance, and then some of the others that you'll see a lot featured in our newsletter. MAPS, the Minority Association of Pre-Medical Students, are absolutely on fire this semester. They have some really great programming, some alumni panels as well. KDSAP do a lot of community initiatives as well. I already mentioned Yukon Rescue. Global Brigades and MedLife take international service trips, which have a clinical component as well. Red Cross Club on campus. And then if you are really interested in global health and population health, that kind of thing, be aware there is a global health symposium organized on campus every spring semester. So look at the picture in the upper right here, because this is a group of 2 years ago, they were sophomores, now they're seniors, who approached us and said, you know, we really want to combine our love for medicine with knitting. And so they started their own club called Knit for NICU. And at this point, they've done a lot of work. They've made partnerships with 3 hospitals in the area, and they routinely drop off shipments of little blankets and beanies and toys that they've crafted and knitted all together. So it just goes to show too that if you have a passion for something and it doesn't already exist at UConn, you can absolutely create it. So jumping back for a second, why might you join a student org? So oftentimes they're great at disseminating information along with different kinds of clinical or service opportunities. You can also meet some of your peers as well as dialogue with professionals in the fields when they often have guest speakers. And then they're usually a really great forum to maybe obtain some leadership type roles down the road. I do want to point out, if we have anyone from the regional campuses joining us today, these are some of the main groups on the regionals that do include a lot of pre-health professional students, but you know, by no means is this limited. Also, you know, it's certainly important to join a club that is not medically related if that's something that's just really meaningful to you and you're passionate about. Okay, because this is one of the things that, again, the med schools want to know that you're a person with passions, you're an exciting person, and it's something unique and exciting that you can bring to the table at their program. Okay. Now, I do want to point out a couple of the resources through community outreach as well. So as I had mentioned, community outreach is the branch at UConn in charge of all service type opportunities. So they do offer one-time programs, semester-long programs, as well as really large national type programs. But if you want to get a sense of some of the health related or programs they have, you can go to the Get Involved tab, then Our Programs, Semester Long Programs, and check out this first chunk right here. Just to highlight a few of them, so the Collegiate Health Service Corps, they do a lot of work in local underserved communities, which may or may not have a large percentage of immigrants, native, non-native English speakers. And they do a lot of public health education and outreach. And you might also do things such as take patients' vitals. They also work in tandem a lot with the migrant farm worker clinics offered throughout Connecticut. Community outreach also offers a fairly typical volunteering program at a hospital. So in this case, the local Wyndham Hospital, which is the town over from Mansfield where the store's campus is based. And then also technically within walking distance of campus, you can find the Mansfield Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation, as well as the Mansfield Senior Center. So these are just some ideas where you could, you know, really connect with some local community members, as well as cultivate that service experience. Now, you will have noted too that they have a lot more kinds of programs. So you don't need to be doing something medically related per se. If you have a passion working with children, for example, you might want to check out some of these youth development or adolescent development programs. Language and literacy, they do a lot of ESL kind of things as well. In fact, I'm just looking, Dr. Sanford, this looks like one of our pre-medical students in this picture right here. And so, you know, just whatever is meaningful to you is the important thing at the end of the day. Okay. Before we jump into the home stretch now of our presentation, what questions do you have about any of the research and or just extracurriculars in general that we've just touched upon? Please drop them in the chat. It's always important to note as well that quality over quantity is a good mantra. You never want to take the checkbox type mentality of saying you're part of 10 different orgs, but they only meet once per year. That doesn't have as much meaning attached to it. It doesn't lend itself to the same depth of experience as something that you're doing on a really regular basis, ideally over an extended time. That's what the schools really want to see. And so even if it's just a couple things that you do, but you're really, really dedicated to, ultimately that has more meaning. I still don't see any questions here. Dr. Sanford, do you have any additional thoughts to add before we move on?
Just reiterate a couple of things. I mean, you could spend your whole life just being in the clubs on the campus and forget you even have classes. So that's not a good idea. So we do ask you to be a little bit of a nerd for a while, just to make sure you get off on the right foot academically. And as Krista's highlighted, it's really, sort of degree of commitment in service. So it's good to try a bunch of things, see if you feel it's meeting your interests and helping you to set your own goals. And are they involved in things that you really want to commit to and be a part of advancing? So it's a little trial and error, but best to settle on a couple areas where you feel you're very involved. You do want to make a personal commitment to it, and hopefully, and often that leads to some leadership roles that you'll assume as part of your activities.
Thank you. We do have one question. So if you're an out-of-state student living at home right now, and you're trying to look for research, do you recommend and or discourage reaching out to local universities for opportunities? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. Anything that makes sense in your particular environment, if it's connected with some class that you're in presently that prompts a particular interest, dialogue with your professor of your class. And, often you may need to get a reference, to get your foot in the door in local places. So at the same time, you're cultivating, a relationship with key faculty, which is one thing I like to point out in these sessions. It's a little harder at bigger schools to, establish good connections with people because the classes are just larger. But really set it as a goal for yourself to at least connect with a few people, and so they get to know you really very well during your time in the school, because there will come a time when you'll be needing to ask folks for letters of recommendation. And so you just need to think about cultivating some relationships with people that you have connected with strongly in one way or the other.
Thank you. Okay, we've got one more little section to cover now. All right, the last big factor of holistic admissions that we want to touch on, bring to your attention today, are something called the core competencies. And so you've probably at some point heard the term transferable skills or soft skills. Essentially, the Association of American Medical Colleges has their own version of these. They maintain a list of 15 core competencies that they feel all entering medical school students should really cultivate and be able to demonstrate. So if you Google that, 15 core competencies, AAMC, you'll come up with them right away, along with greater descriptions as well as real life examples. This lists the 15 of them very briefly here. And again, they're the types of skills, knowledge, really personal attributes that are valued in successful medical school students and professionals in the field. So just to highlight a couple of these, we've talked at length already about that service orientation. So again, whether it's something medically related or not, schools do want to see that you're going into this profession to serve others, that you're coming from a very altruistic background. We talk about teamwork a lot, and so As a physician, dentist, you operate in tandem with other healthcare professionals, and so schools want to see that you're a good team player. What have you already done that indicates that? And maybe you are part of a sports team, for example, and you can use that as an example. But maybe you're in a research lab where you do work with other undergrads, grad students, TAs, postdocs. And so you each have your role to play, but you each work as part of a team. One that we've been talking about a lot during the pandemic is resilience and adaptability. And so every day of your career in the healthcare fields, you're going to run into obstacles, challenges, and schools want to see that, if faced with a challenge, are you going to be able to overcome it? And so we've talked about this a lot in terms of the pandemic and both academic challenges getting involved. And I would just repeat what we said earlier about schools are more interested at the moment that you're engaged in something rather than fixating on the fact that you're not able to obtain shadowing experience at the moment, for example. Because anything you're doing, you can tie back to these core competencies and talk about your development as a person and as a student. Okay, so these are areas that as you move forward in your undergraduate education and even beyond, we just really encourage you to reflect on a lot. Also, in light of the pandemic, a lot of schools have been asking explicit questions about these competency areas, either in their secondary applications and/or at interviews, just saying, how have you demonstrated this competency, and wanting you to explain that. So just always be reflecting and thinking about developing these, and consider right at this moment what you feel your personal strengths are, and maybe which areas you do want to devote a little more time and attention to moving forward. Okay, we're in the home stretch now, just a few more minutes. So there is no, again, right or wrong way to do this. This all depends on, again, what your personal goals are, what your personal timeline is for entering medical or dental school. This is just one sample timeline if you are hoping to begin professional school right after you graduate. Okay, and so when we talked earlier about the 2022 application cycle, for example, cycles are named based on when you'd hope to matriculate to medical or dental school. So the 2022 cycle is for applicants wanting to begin school in fall 2022. However, note that the application process takes place very, very far in advance, especially compared to undergraduate admissions. And so that means these applicants are applying in the summer of 2021. Okay, so it's always helpful to work backwards from whenever you would hope to matriculate to medical or dental school. And so as a freshman, a first-year student, you are encouraged to be a little bit of a nerd, to quote Dr. Sanford. Really focus on academics, starting off strong in your introductory courses, your prereqs, identify resources for success as well, and just really focus on adjusting and settling into college. It's also great to explore some different extracurricular offerings, whether that's through UConn or through some kind of community outlet. And just try some things out and see what's going to get you really excited moving forward. Summer after first year is a great time to turn your attention to those more experiential components. So things like the clinical experience or research or volunteering, if you haven't really had time to focus on them yet. Moving into sophomore year, keep focusing on those academics. If you haven't already, it's a really great time to identify those couple extracurricular offerings that you really want to dedicate yourself to on a regular basis moving forward as well. Okay, and keep taking those classes. Summer after that, you can, again, turn your attention to the experiential things, maybe whatever area you haven't really had time to fully develop yet. Moving into third year, our office would work very closely with you, especially the spring semester of your junior year, if this is your application timeline. And so you'll work with us, you'll collect some letters of recommendation through our office. We have an applicant coaching process as well. And this is likely the time that you're studying really seriously for either the MCAT or the DAT. Okay, the summer is then when you would likely be taking those standardized tests and submitting your applications. So one thing to note, both the applications for MD, DO medical programs, as well as dental programs do typically open around the first week of May. And they do operate on a rolling admissions basis, so it's to your advantage to get your materials in early. And we cover all this information related to applying as well as timelines at our annual application orientation. Then your senior year, you're really just waiting to hear back from schools, submitting additional information and or secondary applications, and interviewing in order to begin school that fall. So if you are planning to take one growth year or more, then you would just push the application portion of this off by a year or two or however many. This is another visual directly from the AAMC. You'll have access to this in the slides we post on our website afterwards, but it looks kind of like a board game, so I like it. Again, though, I don't want you to feel that there's any right or wrong way to do this. This is just one example. Okay, so you can check this out in greater detail later. To highlight a couple last resources here, so definitely check out explorehealthcareers.org because this is great to learn about what different healthcare careers entail, especially ones that maybe you haven't considered before. Just always, keep your options open. There are some official guides from the AAMC as well as ADEA in regards to timelines and then just kind of general introductory info about things to know being a pre-med or pre-dental student. Lastly, some UConn specific resources. So if you're not aware yet, there is a Q Center and they provide a lot of free academic tutoring in the hard sciences as well as calculus. The W Center is a great resource for writing, and please note they do offer personal statement review as well. The CCD is great because they have so many different services, everything from walk-in resume critiques to you can schedule a mock interview, and they also do personal statement review. So we do partner with them for a couple of workshops throughout the year as well. Finally, the AAC is a great resource if you find you're just having a really tough transition to college and or you want to identify things like test taking strategies or time management skills as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any of these centers, set up an appointment and or our office. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left technically. Dr. Sanford, would you like to give some closing remarks?
There's a lot to sort of digest in these sessions. Again, the most important thing from my perspective is just take a step back and think about your goals. What do you really hope to accomplish in your undergraduate phase of your preparation and training? And sometimes you can just get sort of a little bit too narrow tunnel vision about, oh yeah, I got to do this just to get prepared to take this exam. I got to do this just to prepare for this. I mean, think in a little broader terms. What do you want your undergraduate experience to do for you in terms of just your own personal development and search and exploration for what you would like to do. And bottom line is, when you're ready, you're ready, and just don't try to press it too much. Do it at a pace and at a rate that fits you, and that you don't have to sacrifice some of the other goals that are important to you. There's a lot of students these days that don't go right into school right out of undergraduate college. I mean, they do take some additional time, do additional pathways and enrichment to help them, and the professional schools love to see this. So, a lot of times the sort of scheduling and pressure comes from peer pressure, comes from family pressure. You just try to take a deep breath and back off those pressures that sort of you feel every day, and think in more general terms about your goals and where you'd sort of like to see yourself in terms of skills and abilities, at the conclusion of your undergraduate experience. So that's the only comment I guess I would make, Chris.
Wonderful. Well, we do thank you for your time and attention on this Monday morning. I'm not sure if it's supposed to snow today, but please stay warm wherever you are. And, at this point, if you would like to dialogue with us one-on-one, please fill out the appointment form on our website if you're pre-med, or go to nexus.uconn.edu, set up an appointment with Dr. Abbott if you're pre-dent. So thank you again so much for tuning in. We look forward to working with you. Bye.
Well, thanks, Krista. Have a great day.